Hey guys, it is topic video time, and this time we are discussing screenwriters. I asked you guys who are some of your favorite screenwriters and why. So, here we go. Billy Wilder. I've said it before. No one has ever pointed out the insecurities of American society with more biting satire, not even Paddy Chayefsky. Also, his range with different types of characters with consistent attention to detail for each one is practically non-existent. Okay, I'm not sure what you meant by that last part of it, but I totally agree with you. I think Billy Wilder is one of the best writers, I think, of American film, like in history. I look at a movie like Double Indemnity with the great Barbara Stanwyck, with Fred McMurray, with the great Eddie G. Robinson, and I think if you've never seen a noir film, that would be a good place to start. I would say it's one of the better American noir films in history. It has every element, it has every staple of noir, and yet beautifully balanced, and it is a film that is, yes, very much a commentary on American society at the time, American materialism. I remember the first time I ever saw Sunset Boulevard, and I had seen so many clips of it. People had made so much fun of it, and I was like a teenager at the time, and I remember expecting it. It's like, oh, well, this is going to be kind of a satire, a lighthearted satire, very cheeky about, you know, Hollywood and what it means to age in Hollywood, because that's usually what we get. And it turns out I was so wrong. It is very, very dark. And I think that's what Billy Wilder does really well. My favorite movie of his is probably Ace in the Hole. That's more of an underrated one, but it's got a lot of a similar thing. He like pulls you in, very enticing, and it's very nice. It's a fun movie. It's entertaining. A lot of people talk about that movie as, oh, it was so ahead of its time. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think that's really that interesting in terms of saying why it's good, because, you know, a lot of films predict on a basic level what the future is going to be like. And I think yellow journalism was definitely a thing before Ace in the Hole, and it certainly preceded that. But it's more just the way it's handled, how everything seems like, oh, it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. It will, I promise. And then, oh, shit, it's not going to be okay. And just that twist, that crescendo into it, I think is really, really remarkable. So yes, if you haven't seen Billy Wilder, oh my goodness, like that's somebody you need to get into, especially if you're interested in, like, you know, great American cinema. Paul Thomas Anderson, while he's very well acclaimed for his skill and versatility as a director, he's just as versatile as a writer in terms of switching and blending different tones, working in different times and periods. But the most remarkable thing he achieves is writing characters that on the surface level are radically different from each other. Daniel Plainview, Barry Egan, Freddie Quell, etc. But all share a core that is deeply lonely and vulnerable. He just seems to have a measured understanding of the human psychosis. Yes, you said it all there. You're so right in the sense that Paul Thomas Anderson is very underrated as a writer. We all think of him as a great kind of director who has, you know, a lot of technical flourishes, and yeah, that's what he's known for. But none of that would be successful, I don't think, if he didn't have a strong foundation of writing, and he really does. And I think his career has been one of the more interesting ones to develop, because when you look at him in the beginning, you know, I actually think that that's kind of his weaker period. And I've said that. I've reviewed both Boogie Nights and Magnolia, so, you know, go there for more on that. But, you know, he's going more for an Altman, kind of a Scorsese montagey thing, and he's very ambitious. And for me, it's not quite working all together yet. But I think when he starts to really hone in on a specific character, focusing on a specific protagonist, that's where he really flourishes. And he starts to do that with Punch Drunk Love and so on. And yes, characters like Freddie Quell, especially like a Daniel Plainview, the thing that connects a lot of his stories is the idea of like generations, fathers and sons. Clearly that's something that's very important to him. And yes, isolation and loneliness is a big one. I do still think, you know, of all Paul Thomas Anderson films, There Will Be Blood is his magnum opus. That to me is, I think, maybe one of the great American classics. It has everything that you look for in an American classic. It's about capitalism and like rags to riches and fame and what that does to you and all that, but done in such a beautiful way. And I do think the writing is exceptional in that film because of how minimal it is. It is so silent. It's a very quiet movie. And I think that it takes real skill to know when to not say anything, when to just let the moment breathe and let everything be mature. And I think, yes, this is an example of Paul Thomas Anderson at his most mature. It's a devastating film, and I think it's nearly perfect. and I look at something like Phantom Thread, and both of these movies have this quality. Most of his movies do. There's just a weird kind of thing about it. It's slightly off kilter. There's something a little eccentric about it. Phantom Thread is just, it's an intimate love story between a husband and a wife. It's about how complicated love is, how it's a real commitment, how it can be really dark at times and toxic. And yet, even in the midst of all that, there's just a weird kind of sense of humor about it, and how he's able to balance both of those things without seeming gimmicky or whatever. Like, I think that's extraordinary. And so, yes, I think he deserves a lot more credit in that area. Lars Von Trier, his best scripts were either instruments to reinvent cinema, Breaking the Waves, Dancer in the Dark, Dogville, even Epidemic in a way, or almost Lynchian explorations of human pain, female pain like Antichrist and Melancholia. That's an interesting one. So Lars Von Trier for me is a real hit and miss. I think at times he's absolutely brilliant, and I love some of his films. I think Antichrist is an extraordinary film. I think it's just his boldness and willingness to be able to go into areas that are very taboo subjects for most filmmakers, for most people. And the more devastating, the more he's willing to really kind of ram your face into it. And yet, at times it does feel gratuitous. At times it does feel messy. And then at other times it feels absolutely poetic and poignant. Antichrist is maybe my favorite of his films, and I think that's really his stab at making like his own version of possession. It is, as you say here, it's more about female pain, but I think it's also just about femininity and masculinity, combined with the toxicity of loss and how that can affect people, how really violent beings we are. So, I think Lars Von Trier is not afraid to shy away from that kind of stuff. And even though Antichrist is, there are things about it that I think are kind of like, okay, I'm not really sure what you're trying to express here. And I don't think you really know either. Overall, it's got such a power to it. More so than something like Melancholia, which I feel is really thin. It's about depression, but it doesn't express depression in a way that Antichrist does, which I find to be, way more open for exploration and contemplation. But he is certainly somebody kind of like a Gaspar Noé, where like when he's got a movie out, you've got to watch it, and it's really hard to turn away no matter what. So yes, even though he is a hit or miss, he's somebody that I have great respect for. And again, some of his movies I think are phenomenal. And I think because he understands depression and pain so well, he's able to express that through his words. Charlie Kaufman, an auteur who's one of the most imaginative, weirdest, original, and innovative screenwriters of all time. From having a guy going inside a celebrity's mind and being John Malkovich, to erasing a loved one in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, he's a mastermind. Yeah. Charlie Kaufman is one of my favorite American screenwriters for sure. And he has been for maybe, over 10 years easily. And it's really amazing because being John Malkovich was the first script. It wasn't his first script, but it was the first one he was able to get out there that got attention, and they were able to make it into a feature. And you look at that, and it's like, if it's your first introduction to Kaufman, you're like, holy shit, this is just so clever. And it's just so ambitious and original. And it's like, where does he go from here? It's just so beautifully balanced because he has such an awareness of story construction, especially, if you just listen to him talk, his awareness, his hypersensitivity to every little thing. He's a very cerebral person. He's got some excellent videos on YouTube where he's doing like lectures on writing that I think are worth your time if that's something you're interested in. But yeah, I think with being John Malkovich, it's so strong. And yet you look back at it and it's like, oh, you're just getting started. There are flaws in that film, and there are ideas that I remember thinking I want them to be expanded on. And talk about somebody who has gotten better and better and more ambitious as they go along. Synecdoche, New York, I think is like the one time where he's like, he has really the creative control I think that he wanted. It's his first time directing, and it's, his baby, his script. And he explores so much in his movies. Really, he does. I mean, he's exploring huge kind of existential themes. He's very preoccupied with death. Clearly, he's preoccupied with kind of how we interpret things through our own senses, and how that's very different oftentimes than what is happening externally. Ideas like, does the soul leave the body after death? Does it continue on after death? Is the soul and the mind even really separate? What is art in relation to the mind? He's very meta. He's also making a commentary. He's very funny in terms of just making fun of, society and show business. He just has it all in a way that is so intellectually interesting. I need to see Synecdoche, New York again, but after watching I'm Thinking of Ending Things and reviewing it, I mean, that might be his greatest film. And it's so interesting because it's an adaptation. It's not his original work. And normally he's somebody who really likes, writing in his own voice. And, but I think that just goes to show you just how special he is and how he's just on another level from most writers. Because when you look at the original story from the novel of I'm Thinking of Ending Things, it chooses to end the story in a way that is typical, kind of a device. And it's fine. I think there are interesting things you can debate about it, but it's not particularly open nearly in the ways that Charlie Kaufman does it. He's like, nope, we're going to take this third act, we're going to completely deconstruct it, make it abstract, open it up, and explore the reason why. Explore what this means to me in terms of my mind, in terms of my art. And it is absolutely extraordinary. It turns into almost this like Mulholland Drive sort of surrealist piece. And yeah, I'm sorry, but just there is so much more to debate and think about, and it's so much more emotionally resonant than I think if he had gone more faithfully to the novel. But yes, all of these are excellent writers, and you guys had some really good answers as usual. There's always some really, really intelligent comments out there, but that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you look over here, you will see my Patreon supporters. The link to support is below. Also, my social media is below that. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.